Our democracy is hanging by a thread. If you believe, as I do, that our 234-year-old experiment as a democratic republic is worth salvaging, then it's time for us to take bold action. Throughout US history, there's a continuous thread, a bloodstained thread that we don't talk enough about. And that continuous bloodstained thread is white supremacy. It begins with the founding of our country. As you may know, in the US Constitution, enslaved Africans are counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of determining apportionment in the House of Representatives. What you may not know is that the US Constitution also contains a baked-in provision, ensuring that the importation of enslaved Africans would continue unabated for at least 20 years, giving this abominable approach an economic foothold in our new nation. Of the 55 signers of the US Constitution, about half own slaves. White supremacy is a continuous thread. Following the Civil War, ex-Confederate soldiers and other Southerners formed vigilante bands to terrorize and harm blacks and their allies. The Ku Klux Klan saw a resurgence in the 1920s, sometimes garnering enough support that they controlled entire state governments. KKK violence and intimidation continue even in the present day. White supremacy and mob violence are a continuous thread. In 1898, a mob of whites overthrew the multiracial coalition that had been elected to office in Wilmington, North Carolina. They destroyed the only black newspaper in the city. They killed hundreds and destroyed property and businesses belonging to black citizens. Soon thereafter, other local jurisdictions began passing laws to disenfranchise black voters, which is continuing to this very day in states all across the US. White supremacy and mob violence are a continuous thread. Politicians have been stoking white racial grievances for decades, going back to Richard Nixon's Southern strategy. Refined in various political campaigns, for example, the Willie Horton ad that George H.W. Bush ran against Michael Dukakis, white grievance politics reached what I hope is an apex this past January 6th, when a mob of whites attacked the US Capitol building, seeking to invalidate the votes cast by urban blacks as somehow fraudulent. White supremacy and mob violence are a continuous thread. At key points throughout US history, white men have taken violent action and exercised mob rule to ensure that white supremacy was maintained. White men, it's time for us to level up in combating white supremacy. We need to get off the sidelines and confront white supremacy squarely. And even though I'm saying level up, and I'm using a sports metaphor like get off the sidelines, let me be clear, this is not some sort of a game. But white men, if we're not part of the solution, then we're part of the problem. Now, obviously, I'm a white man, so how do I see this? Well, I wasn't born harboring racist thoughts. However, like you, I was socialized by the media, by a flawed and incomplete version of history taught in schools. I, like you, was influenced by parents and peers, reproducing the socialization that they received without questioning or deconstructing it. As a white man, I don't have incentives to dismantle structural racism when it benefits me. However, if racism is learned, then it can be unlearned, and it should be unlearned. Clearly, systemic racism benefits whites at the same time that it oppresses people of color. But there are negative impacts to systemic racism for whites that are often overlooked. For example, we're separated one from another with our fellow citizens of the world. As the world becomes more interdependent, it's clear that my well-being as a white man is intimately and intrinsically linked with the well-being of my brothers and sisters that are people of color. We need look no further than the transmission of a global pandemic virus to know that this much is true. Although there are not visible role models, nor a clear roadmap for doing this work, it's imperative that we get started on the journey. One starting point I recommend is the book Me and White Supremacy, written by Layla Saad. This book is written as a 28-day challenge to read and reflect. I started at the beginning of this month. To dismantle white supremacy, we need to begin by decolonizing our own minds. We need to talk about how we as white men have benefited from white supremacy. We need to be honest about the times that we've been complicit or silent. We need to interrogate our own implicit biases. And we all have these implicit biases. We need to be in conversation with one another as white men. We need to be co-conspirators for social change and to work for real and not just for the optics. We ought to be about forging intersectional coalitions and honestly assess what it is that holds us back. White men, it's time for us to level up. We need to close this sordid chapter in our national history once and for all. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.